saluto a tutti.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the AJC. All right, it is match day. We got Verona, and thank God we can get back to the football. Holy smokes. Talk about catching friendly fire out there. Been an absolute war zone, boys. I got Lou, I got Joe Cappuccino with me today. Fellas, how you doing today?
I was good until Joe came onto the show this morning, and morning ruined.
See,
Morning
I was
ruined.
going to say the same thing, Lou. I was great until I showed up and I saw your beautiful face.
Some rivalries never die.
Oh man. Oh man. Even friendly fire within the AJC. There you go. But it's match day today, everybody. And yeah, like I said, it's been an absolute war zone out there. I was catching a lot of heat, and it all kind of stemmed from, I don't know, these two French guys that wanted to put up some billboard here over Max, and everybody having their personal feelings about it. I thought it was a little bit of disrespect, a little bit disrespectful there. Many challenged that, said it wasn't disrespectful, but one thing that was coming out of it was, all of a sudden, the fan clubs, the official fan clubs, North America, put out a nice message. Put out a nice message kind of backing it, and just saying like, no, we back all our members until the end. And just kind of this message of let the management make the decisions at the end. And then they get called out. I get called out for defining fandom. And that part made me laugh. That part made me laugh because I said, in no way, shape, or form is that defining fandom. Because nobody's battling the opinions, right? So we're going to kind of talk about this, but we're going to talk about it in a different way. We're going to kind of take Max out of the equation, and we're going to talk strictly about coach versus players. Where does the separation get to, and when you start analyzing and putting more emphasis on the players or the coaching, and why do we feel a certain way towards Max and a certain way towards our roster and our players? Because I think that there's a lot of contradicting arguments that are really pushing the case for Max. And I kind of have the main arguments, because this is another thing why I have to laugh when I get called out for defining fandom, when we have represented all angles and all sides since day one. And this has been an open show, an open channel. People are welcome to reach out and come and join and make their arguments, make their cases. Okay? So we're going to kind of take a look at that. And of course, we're going to get into all the other news. All right? But first and foremost, we are going to tackle some of these outlying topics and players and everything. We're hearing Giuntoli and Man are set to walk away. We're hearing certain exits. Pogba, Sandro, Moise Kean. Guys, I actually have no argument against that. I think if anyone you can make a slight case is maybe Moise Kean, but I'm fine saying see ya to all three. Anybody feel any other way?
Kick him out the door and don't look back.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
pretty much. Pretty much.
Yeah.
There you go. There you go.
Rafael Pinamonte there, his Paul Pogba's agent saying he has been ready, is ready to return, and some are saying, you know what, let's get him back and see I'm done banking on this guy. Okay? I'm done banking on it. It's just, I don't think it's gonna happen. Juve's got to look for a way out. They got to move. Okay? So we're all in agreement there. Loan or sale of young players. Now you get to Miretti, Illing Jr., and Hans Nicolucci Caviglia. I want to know from you guys and everybody in the live chat, all right? Miretti, are you loaning him? Are you selling him? Okay. Illing Jr., loan or sale. Hans Nicolucci Caviglia, loan or sale. So, Lou, let's start with you with each of those guys.
This is hard. I would probably sell Nicolucci. I like that kid, but Verona is coming back. He's a better player, so probably no room for him in the future. So sell him, sell Ailing because he's not going to sign a renewal. I think that's just done. He's not really getting any time for whatever reason. So yeah, sell him. And I personally still think we should loan Moretti for a year because even if we sold him, I don't think we'd get much in return for him. So maybe a loan, like if they're gonna move on from him in a year, get some experience, drive that price up, or come back, to Juventus. So I think it would still loan Moretti.
Okay. Okay. And then Joe, each three of those guys, where are you at?
Uh, I'm on Lou's page with selling Hans. I just don't I don't see him staying. Unfortunately, I like the kid too, but I think Illing and Miretti both get loans in my opinion. I think Illing's ceiling for like his development is pretty high. I mean, despite him not signing a renewal, I mean, it could still happen. We have no idea. Miretti definitely warrants a loan, and I think that we've been saying that on this show for quite some time now. He has all of the tools and characteristics to be a great midfielder for us in the future, but he just needs a little bit more refinement, if that makes sense. So maybe on a team with a little bit more physicality, get some more muscle on him, whatever. But yeah, I think a loan would do Miretti good.
Yeah, I've been kind of on the fence with Moretti, and if I guess it for me kind of comes down to numbers. I think if I'm gonna say see you later to Moretti, I'm kind of open to it, but I think loan ultimately is probably going to be the best call there for Moretti. Animesh coming out just saying he simply doesn't have it. Alex P. Moretti needs a lot. How people are claiming he's almost there is wild to me. Yeah, it's like, I don't know, man. It's the decision making, which we'll talk about in a bit. But Moretti, for me, probably loan just for now. Illing Jr., I'm fine with the sale there, guys. I have been for a while. I mean, he's kind of an odd one there. This is probably one main Max detractor there for fans is like Illing Jr. They just put so much on Illing Jr. and the fact he's not getting minutes that they're like, this is one of his number one hits. A guy that we just picked up seems to be this massive hit against Max too, and that's Alcaraz, which we will get to in a bit. But I'd probably go loan Miretti, sell Illing Jr. Hans Nicolucci Caviglia, if we are going to get to a point where we loan this guy again, you might as well pull the plug and make the sale, is how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You know?
that was my logic too. Like I
Yeah.
just like why loan him again?
Yeah, so if he's not going to make the cut now and come in as rotational pieces or whatnot, I'd probably just pull the plug now. So that's kind of how I'm feeling about those three. Shifting to Alcaraz, this new signing, and obviously we got news this week that he could potentially start or whatnot, and everybody has been hitting out at Max really hard on the whole Alcaraz thing, even against Udinese, and I was actually surprised at how hard some fought that argument to the point where we're just I haven't really felt that way, to be honest. Like, it's like, okay, is Max the only guy out there that takes a really slow approach with new signings? Like, and not getting them in immediately? Like, I've seen that done quite a bit. And for me, it's like, it's one of these things where we don't know everything. We just make our opinions and form them from the outside looking in. It's kind of like when Rugani didn't play and we saw Sandro come in and his agent comes out the next day saying there was no way he was capable to start that match in terms of Rugani. And that's kind of an eye-opener. It's like, okay, which is why when we get to the Max thing, which we will talk about in a bit, it's like, trust the management who's there dealing in the day-to-day. And while I do believe Giuntoli still needs to prove himself, so to speak, I have faith in him because of one major thing, and that's he is everywhere. When you see the videos, this guy he is at the training facility. He is around the training grounds. He is on the pitch during the training sessions. He is in the locker room before the game, at halftime, post-match, in and involved as much as you possibly can be. So I'm just saying, it's not that I'm Allegri in or Allegri out, but I'm like, trust the management. Like, new guys coming in, give them their due like we did the guys before. So, but this Alcaraz thing, do you think it's worth making this tough a fight as far as his minutes so far?
I have a really big problem with this because here's the thing. When we signed Alcaraz, majority of the fan base was like, in the AGC mentions, where it's like, who the hell is this guy? None of us have heard of him. And now, like, we didn't play him in a game, and it's like, like, what are you doing? Like nobody knew who he was. Like,
Yeah.
the most I could find on him was a scouting report from when he was in the championship. Like, that was it. And he's jumping. He could be a really talented player. I mean, the scouting report was great, but like, he's jumping from the championship to Serie A to Juventus. They were just in the title fight 2 match days ago, right? You can't. I don't know. You can't just throw a guy into the wind. And speaking of, just because he didn't play in the game against Udinese, they did play him for a couple minutes in the game against Inter. That was his debut in the biggest game of the year. It's not like they just ignored him. He's been rotting there for 2 matches. People just pretend like that didn't, happen. So I just, you gotta figure. Take some time to figure him out because, right, like, he's a high, redemption clause. They don't really know what his potential is. It's kind of a little bit like Daljo, where it's like, hey, like, we're looking at, can this guy help us not this year, but maybe in like a year or 2, right? Like, is there potential to sign him into the summer? So I think that they need to give him time to grow. I also think about, like, in his debut video, we talked about being like really nervous. Maybe there's a little bit of like, hey, I need to settle a bit. Maybe you could see that in training. Like, he does things really well, but there's just a bit of like, hey, match day, I'm a little nervous. I mean, coaches can read that where like maybe fans can't,
Yeah. The transition from tennis to football is wild too. So we got to give Carlos Alcaraz a little bit of a break here, eh, Charlie? Listen, Joe, how do you feel? Do you think it's this big fight that it needs to be and this big hit on the coach?
No, I mean, I honestly don't understand. This is a guy who sees the players every friggin' day. Like, what are the fans seeing that, like, the coach isn't seeing? I'm sure, unless you're a bona fide absolute superstar, there's no way that you just walk into the team and start performing. Like, I'm sure that Allegri, thinks of all of these things. Anybody can say what they want, but one thing Allegri isn't he's not a complete idiot. So he's just not gonna, throw this young kid into the lineup. He hasn't seen enough of him yet. He had been in the team for what, a week at that point or less.
Yeah.
And we're expecting him to play immediately. No, like, you got to see where his skills are at, like where his fitness is at, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, if this is a hill people want to die on, pick a better hill. Seriously.
Sorry, Alberto. I also think that he would probably have played more if we weren't in like a downward like spiral. Like, right? Like, the way the team's form has been, you're kind of like, all right, like, let me trust some of the guys who like were there like before, right? It's like, let's not take any risks, let's not take any gambles, let's try to salvage what we can. Like, I think if they were like winning a little bit, you might have seen, if they were beating Udinese like they were before, you might have seen him in that match.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If we're bringing in players who need to grow or keeping players who have yet to find their game, then our expectations shouldn't be the Scudetto. We need to build a Scudetto winning squad. Exactly. Okay, this is something we've been saying for a while, is that this build or whatnot, it's taking shape. But a lot of these young guys, I've been saying for a while, they don't find room in a truly built Juventus side, I think, and I will stand behind that, and I will back that it's not there right now. That's why I actually do see, when we're talking about this season and we're breaking down this season, we are so harsh on one position that isn't even on the pitch out of this entire thing. I'm like, there is definitely a foot forward this season that I can see. And when you factor in the same guys that we all talk about, okay, as far as availability problems, consistency problems, and I'm just talking about the key guys, not the young guys. I'm giving the young guys a pass. There's still growth there that you can be. If you would have told me at the start of the season, Inter's going to potentially break that 102 points, I would have said you're crazy. It's not going to happen. But here we are, and that's who is setting the bar right now. So all of a sudden, a gap that we didn't think was going to be that big, I didn't think so anyways, as far as expectations go, it's a lot bigger. Okay? That just means we still have work to do, but we would have had work to do regardless. Even if Juve pulled this one out, it wasn't one that we thought. Like, this one was Inter's to drop, right? So we still have work to do. Like, there's still work to do. And I've made a shift earlier on in this season. And this is the perfect segue into this whole Max thing, where it's getting kind of crazy, if you ask me. But I made a shift on these players earlier on in the season. Because when one of the main arguments against Matt, and that's where we're going to take this thing, because I don't want to get into what's respectful, what's disrespectful, whatnot, and what people's thoughts are on that. That's fine. Yes, fans have the freedom to voice their opinions, but I just personally feel like there's lines that you kind of cross, and you got to keep it within some type of, parameters per se. But nonetheless, that's neither here nor there. We're going to talk about coach versus players. One of the main arguments against Max is he is not playing to the team's strengths. But I challenged that earlier on in the year when I started to ask more about these players. And the reason I did is because I see decision-making issues all over the pitch, everybody, especially in the final third. And I said, when we started going this route, do I want to see this team get into a shootout with teams offensively? No, because I don't have the faith in them in that final third. For me, if you're playing to the strength, for me, the strength is at the back, where you will find our most consistent players, which are Bremer, Danilo, and Szczesny, in my opinion. So we kind of are playing to our strength. Are we not? Would you guys challenge me on that? Is there anybody there challenging me on that?
I agree completely with you, because we are playing to the strength. I also would say to people, like the shootout argument, we did try that. Remember when we played the high press in those first couple of games? The first team that got in the shootout with us was Sassuolo. We saw how that went, right? Like a couple errors there. Like that was the first team. But like, I think right there you kind of realize, like, hey, maybe the strength is not high press, elite midfield, dynamic crossing. Maybe the strength is your back line, your Bremers, your Danilos. And Vlahovic, too, is a strength that, was producing pretty good up until the Inter game, which, hey, like he's a young guy, like that happens, right? But Vlahovic was having a really good 2024, so I can't – go ahead.
And that's another thing. You've got your two main guys up top that one of them faced a ton of questions whether he can even do it at Juventus, all right? And had pubalgia issues and all this and missing 120 days or whatever in a short period of time with Juventus. You've got Federico Chiesa, who we've got to be patient with or whatnot. We have been patient with, but his numbers aren't there. He started off the season red hot, had another stoppage, trying to go. Are we set to bank everything on these guys, or do you play to your strength? The other thing is the midfield, okay? We have to talk about the midfield. You can't talk about this and not bring up the midfield. The 3-5-2 is set up to support the midfield tremendously, okay? If you want to shift it to something that has three midfielders in there solely, they have even more coverage to take care of. And they get even less protection in behind them. Okay? Mm-hmm. This is set up for these guys to really excel and mask deficiencies. Okay? And if we want to talk about the midfield on its own, and again, young guys will get the pass. Rabiot is not the Rabiot of last year. Okay? So that still puts him on one good year out of like 4 or 5. Okay. You've got Locatelli, who I'm done talking about the out of position thing because it's been 3 years there. We've seen games after he came back from the Azzurri, what he can do, what he's capable of. Consistency is not on a coach. That's up to you as a player. Nothing has changed for me. If I look at this system, we have seen these same guys ball out in this system, in this setup. Consistency is to the players.
15 games unbeaten, and now all of a sudden we're just supposed to throw that away because our formation, lacks.
I'm not there.
Two plays the same formation, and they're
Yep.
they play an outdated formation. They're in the Champions League final, but we don't want to talk about that.
Now, Mark's saying, Bert, that might be true versus Inter, but not relegation teams. But again, I can't stress this enough, because one of these things about putting it so much on, just a coach in general, okay? These are the words that, you'll hear stress out, because I've heard this exact same thing from several managers that we have called for in the past to come to Juventus, current managers. Coaches can give the players a few ideas and notions. Ultimately, they are the ones who make the difference. If we say that it's all on one position, being the coach, what does that say about all the players that won it and were champions with Juventus in the past? Because if one sense you're going to put everything on this guy right now, and by the way, throughout this entire week while I've been taking heat, never once did I say Allegri in. And I'm still not saying that, okay? We'll get to that in a bit. I never once said Allegri in, okay? But if we're going to put it all in one spot, what does that say about those guys that were champions at Juventus? One of the main arguments against Max Allegri is he won before because of those rosters. So if you're going to put that big of an emphasis on the guys on the pitch then, how come it's not consistent now? Right?
My thing
Thanks
is
for the question.
It's my whole thing with this is like, we blame the coach for ruining players, right? But it's like the players in question. I mean, Max's first year, Locatelli, how many times did he charge into the edge of the area and score goals? He had like 3 or 4 like that, right? How many times in the last 2 years have we seen him do that? We saw we saw against Milan, deflected chance, great, but like Locatelli, who I think is like pretty underrated, there's times when you're like, okay, like you could do a little bit more. There's times you look at Rabiot and say, hey, like you were pretty good last year, but this year you could do more. I think Rabiot hasn't really gotten many goal opportunities this year. Like I kind of wonder, hey, why is that different, right? You look at someone like Chiesa. Chiesa, as talented as he is, at his age, 3 goals in 18 matches is not a really, or 4 goals, sorry, is not a really great stat. I'm sorry, but to be that level of player with potential, I understand the knee injury, the Del Piero thing, 2 years. To have that level of talent and to only have 3 or 4, like 4 or 5 goals. You take the last game, for example. Chiesa has an opportunity at the edge of the box, right? He has a rip at it, and he barely challenges the keeper. I mean, it's a great chance, right? You look at things like that, and you go, all right, that's not a manager thing. That's a player thing, right? Even if you have an opportunity, right, and you're hitting the post, you're getting close, a couple good saves, you're like, all right, the numbers are like Vlahovic just kind of like that. The numbers were down, but the opportunities, he's just messing it up, right? So you're like, okay, you can fix this, right? Someone like Chiesa, you have to get that. You have to show that like potential. And that comes down to your players, right? If you're saying, hey, the knee injury, and I'm not picking on Chiesa, I love Chiesa, but just because he's a hot topic subject when it comes to Max, right? If they're saying like, hey, the knee injury is a thing, it's limited him. Well, if that's the case, you got to change your game, right? Like Del Piero changed his game. Like, maybe you're not the out and out winger you were before. Maybe you're not running at people. Maybe you got to learn to come inverted a little bit. Maybe you got to learn to play off your striker a bit more. You change your game, right? Smart players can do that. Players that can't do that, they lack a little bit. And that to me is a really big problem in this team where it's like, they're not really asking people to do much. I mean, people hate Weston McKennie, right? That still, I think there's people who go, hey, that's not a top midfielder, right?
Yeah.
Which, fair, I understand the argument. But Weston McKennie understands if I'm on the right side of midfield and Cambiasso likes to come inverted, I have now learned how to play his position so I can, pair up with him and we can have good synergy on the right flank. If Weston
Right.
McKennie can figure that out, some of these other guys could figure out how to move a little bit freely, to move the best of their decision. Rabiot, Chiesa, those guys on that left side that lacks, you can figure it out. Weston McKennie, like I said, like most people say he's below par, but he's figured it out. Like, why can't a talented player like Chiesa or Rabiot figure that out? Like, it doesn't make any sense to me.
You got James here saying Allegri cannot convince me he's trying to win when he starts Kostic after his worst game. Sandro, there's not as much depth to prevent the start, but come on, Kostic is used. But the thing is, here's the thing, like, Illing Jr. isn't this be-all, end-all. Like, he hasn't, it's like, it just, the gap there isn't enough. What has Max done, though? Last game he tried Cambiasso on the left, Weah on the right. Weah did absolutely nothing. Absolutely
I was
nothing.
disappointed with that.
And is that on Max or is that on Weah? I heard people trying to say Weah's not in his natural position. He's a winger. Bullshit.
Also, that role from like where he was playing, like in Lille when he was playing, I think the first year they were in the 4-4-2 and then they were in the 4-4-3. That is not that much different. It's literally like you're just a little bit further back when you start.
Before he came to us, he played
different.
everywhere on the right side. Furthermore, this position talk needs to stop. It just needs to stop in general. Federico Chiesa can't play second striker. However, had one of his strongest seasons with Pirlo playing right outside mid, you guys. His strong year. This year, everybody is claiming on. He played outside on a 4-4-2. And it's like nobody said a fucking word. All of a sudden, if this guy's a natural winger, second striker isn't a far cry. I had somebody battle me. Do you think Sissoko, Momo Sissoko could have played right back? It's crazy to think positions don't matter. The funny thing was I said check Sissoko because he did play right back, not for Juventus. That guy played right back anywhere across the mid and deep lying midfielder by the center backs. The bottom line for me is players play, winners win. This position thing for me is crazy. If you're not asking something like extreme, like say you're going to put a player like Chiesa as a target striker up front, okay, that's stupid, right?
Do you guys remember Paduin, our most important game of 14-15, the last group stage game we had to win? He was playing as a midfielder. He started as a right-sided midfielder, right? He was just a right winger. Then he played center midfield that year. And then he played right back that year. Now, Paduin was an average player.
Yeah.
Intelligent player, but an average player. So you're telling me our really good players, our really talented players can't go from right wing to right wing back or left winger to second striker? That doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
no,
maybe I don't understand. To me, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm not fighting this fight on positions, you guys. Like, it just, for me, it's used too much to suit a narrative, which at the end of the day, I've never heard ballers and players, complain or bitch about where they are on the pitch. It's up to them to get the job done. You can look to our players that have fought the fight for coaches before that have said like, hey, you know what? No, it's us. It's us on the pitch. And again, going back to the quote I gave you, and that quote is not, just associated to one coach. You will hear all of the guys and all of the best say the same thing. A coach can give you ideas, notions, and everything like that. Ultimately, it's to you guys up on the pitch. You can have a rah coach that wants to fire you up. It's still up to you to get out there, get the job done. The majority of the credit needs to go to the players in winning, but they can't be they can't have the slate cleared completely in defeat.
I got another thing that like kind of irks me about this, the player thing, because another thing that we hear a lot with the coaches, like, hey, well, if we had Conte, the rah-rah, the mythos, he wouldn't settle for anything.
Yeah.
And they might be right about that. I mean, Conte did a lot of great things. Conte also had Pirlo, Buffon, Chiellini, Barzali, Del Piero was still there in that first year. I mean, they had icons in that locker room.
Lichtsteiner.
Lichtsteiner was a really good player in Serie A. Arturo Vidal was a great player in the Bundesliga when he was signed. Matri and Quagliarella were journeymen. They had been around Serie A for a long time. You didn't have a host of young players, and like our vets, the Danilos, the Tex, the Sandros, the Miliks, we hear all the time are not real leaders and not Juventus quality, so we should forget about them. So really, we just have like a bunch of young players that like have some talent, but Conte would just come in and he would fix it because it doesn't need the veteran leadership. That to me, like I think that like we lack in the leadership department a little bit. Like we've seen some strides, we've seen a little bit of like potential from a Locatelli, a Bremer, even a Rabiot, even the Vlahovic, but not to the point where they're like going to drive a locker room yet. And that's what comes from young players, right? That's like you're learning. I mean, maybe Rabiot could be a little bit different, but some of those guys are younger players. Bremer, Vlahovic, and Locatelli are still on the younger side of things, right? They're not full-blown captains, right? But that's what comes with that, right? You have a lot of really great games where you're good, and then you have periods where you're bad, and then you have games against Inter when you look at the first 20 minutes and like I'll nitpick Locatelli here for a minute. First 20 minutes, Locatelli looked like he was afraid to switch the field anytime he got the ball. He was getting rid of it so fast when he had the ball. He was firing at people, right? Yeah. That's a little bit of nerves, right? It's a young player. So I just think that they take things out of we take things out of context, right? We go back to underdog teams and go, they did this and this, and it's like, yeah, but let's like look at them with context, right? Sorry,
for me,
that was a long-winded rant.
For me, it's just, again, the players cannot be completely absolved of any wrongdoing in every defeat, and we keep going around in circles. At the end of the day, it comes down to expectations, and we don't make the calls. So I said in the summer I would have made a coaching change. The team didn't. They decided not to. So I set my expectations. So I asked, and one of the questions came in, an early Storm the Barn, and it came in from Sev, and it says, does another coach come in here and do better than Max has this season with this same group? And for me, we're talking about a team that's only got 3 losses. I mean, you could talk about a different approach, a different setup, but I think there would probably be other shortcomings because the 3-5-2 is set up to help all of our troubled areas right now. So I question if you want to go to what, a 4-2-3-1, a 4-3-3, that we wouldn't have other problems. And I've been there, like, I remember Saturday coming in and everybody thinking the goals were going to come and it was going to be crazy. It wasn't happening. It's not just like that. And that's another thing. While we go hard on the 3 years, Max has had 3 years, and we're seeing stats pulled up about numbers, spending. Well, the spending is largely over the decade of dominance. When you look at the numbers Max Allegri received backing him in the Mercato, okay? So if we look at it in these 3 years, his first year that he came in, we picked up Keane and Locatelli. That's it from that side. And Keane was a scramble because Ronaldo, bye-bye. And you just took a guy that scored 100 goals in 3 seasons away from a team that was built essentially to just feed him. And we saw the locker room issues that were created from that, and there was a lot of issues. That year, that's tough to handle. That's tough to handle. We were saying, I remember, I went back to those shows, you almost have to wipe that one kind of clean, okay?
Yeah.
But spending, second season, last season, Gatti, Kostic, and Milik, who the fan base rips on a daily, okay? Both of those guys. Pogba.
Oh, we know how that turned out.
Di Maria.
Plays for us.
Di Maria. And then Bremer. Bremer was a solid pickup. But Pogba and Di Maria freeze. Gatti, who knows what you're really getting, like a Serie C player, okay? Serie C. Kostic and Milik, cheaps. He's not spending like crazy. We're not going nuts. And again, we have issues with these players. Milik was the guy that goes out and gets the stupidest red in a crucial game against Empoli where we can go 4 points up before facing Inter. That's Milik. Kostic. One-dimensional. Can't figure out that you can cut inside centrally for whatever reason. But this is the guys. So, but then the switch is, these are Max's guys. These are who Max chose. Did Max go out and choose these guys, or was this probably the best out of the options available to us based on where we were financially, because everybody seems to forget in year one, you're cutting down from 342 million euro deficit, everybody.
Can't remember too. In year one, we were working with fake books too, apparently.
This
So
season,
Yeah.
this season, way up. Now we can add in the January signings of Vlahovic. Vlahovic came in January. That was a big one and whatnot, but started off good. His kind of consistency, he's shown what he can do in this 3-5-2 setup. The majority of our players have shown what they can do in this 3-5-2 setup. For me, consistency is on them. But the ultimate question is this. Are we Allegri in or are we Allegri out? Because Michael Razzo asked that earlier on in the chat. For me, I am this, everybody. I need to see more out of our players more consistently. All I'm going to say is I'm neither. I am whatever the club decides, okay? But I'm going to wait to see how the season ends, because my expectation was reach the Coppa Italia final and be in that battle amongst the top, at least in the second spot. Those were my, battle for the Scudetto. And I did not expect whoever was going to win the Scudetto to potentially break 102 points, okay? So we're not far off my expectations right now, so I'm going to wait it out before I actually say, no, you know what? He's got to go. But I'm definitely not on the big, he's got to go right now. And I understand some saying, well, we play this way against smaller teams. But look at the games, though. Because even if we look at Udinese, okay, a smaller team, 70% possession, okay, that should be like playing on a playground for players at Juventus. I would love to play games where my team gets 70% possession, because I'm going to ask for that ball, I'm going to demand it, and I'm going to get something done. If not, I'm going to kill myself trying to do so. But like 70% possession, that's not an approach or style failure. That's you guys on the pitch not getting the job done. So for me, I'm still waiting because we're not far off my expectations going into this year. So I'm not even going to answer that one just yet. I'm going to say I'm going to hang tight. But I do have faith in Giuntoli. You guys, where are you at right now? Can you make that call right now, or do you still want to wait? Where are you at? Joe?
The one thing that keeps playing in my mind with this whole thing is who comes in afterwards. I just don't see the coach that can come in and do a mind-blowingly better job than Allegri can. And again, this is like you, Al, I'm not trying to copy your take or anything, but I'm not 100% Allegri in or Allegri out either. Going into the Inter game, or even the Empoli game if you want to, we were on fire. And I've been asking myself, I'm like, what? Sure, the Milik red card and all of that good stuff, but like, what exactly happened with the team between that small span of games? What exactly happened? And I feel like something happened with the players, that maybe the pressure just got to them in the Empoli game going into Inter, or what have you. I don't know, but it can't all be Allegri's fault, right? We can't do that. And like I said, in terms of Allegri in versus Allegri out, not 100% sure, but he does have one more year on his contract. I think if we were to fire him at the end of the season, I don't know if I'll be, thinking, not sure that's a great idea.
Yeah.
Just from a consistency point of view.
Lou?
As of now, I'm max in. I'll take a firm stance with that. I'll take some hate for it too. But I think based on the project, the sustainability, based on the fact that we may not have a ton of money to throw around next year, I don't see – Thiago Motta is a really good option. I understand why people would want him. I think he fits a lot of what Juventus is. So, like, if we did separate Max, like, he'd be a good replacement. Conte, I really love and respect Conte. I always will. But he's going to want players. He was talking to Telegraph this week. His goal when he returns is to win the Champions League. We're about 4 or 5 years away from that, maybe. That might be a little extreme, but we're a couple years away from that, right? So I think I looked at the last renewal, right? And the rumor was it was to 2026. So next year's 24, 25. the end of next year comes out, like we'll be in a better financial standing probably in 2025. So at the end of next year, we come out of it and it's like, hey, we haven't gotten any better. Say goodbye to Max. You start over fresh with a coach that you can actually financially back, and we're not handcuffed. I'd also wager, and this might be kind of bold, I don't know. As good as Inter has been this year, they're historic, right? They've only lost one game. We went 15 matches unbeaten. We've only lost 3. We have a handful of draws in there that I think with some quality players could turn. I think if you give this team a couple experienced players, it may just only be like 2 or 3 or like 4. I think that would help this team a lot. It just needs a couple vets to sprinkle in there to make up for like some bad playing veterans, right?
Yeah.
I think I know Felipe Anderson isn't a popular name, but he's been around a long time. He's a utility player. I think Zaccagni could help this team a little bit in the same way that Vucinic helped Conte a bit. And I think there's Cop Miners, has been in Serie A a little while, has played in Europe. I think D'Algio is actually kind of an experienced player for being 23 years old. He's played in the Champions League. He won a title with Lille, which, I understand League One, but they beat out PSG, like a stacked PSG team that year. So I think that there's if you sprinkle this with some experienced players and some quality players, I think you could close this gap a little bit.
I'm going to talk to this point too. Mota competing for top 4 with mediocre squad. Our squad is better than 70% of the teams in Serie A on paper. How can you defend Allegri? Because on paper means shit. Bottom line. I don't want to hear about our wage and what we play players, because this is the whole point I've made almost this entire show, almost this entire season, when I turned on them, these players, and said, we need more out of these guys, okay? It is not the same to play for a Bologna that finished in 8th spot, that is making a jump to trying to fight for the top 4. It's easier when the expectations aren't there. It's easier when teams don't play you like this intense threat or whatever, like their life depends on it because they're playing against one of the top sides. It's completely different. It's different for the players playing for that team, not facing the intense scrutiny that comes for them with even a draw. Look at what happens around Juventus, even in a draw. Bologna went through a stretch just recently where they couldn't get a point to save their life. Okay, a slump of like 3-4 games, whatever, 5 games, something like that, where they weren't doing well, and nobody said a peep. Okay,
I got
nobody said a peep. 1 point out of 3 games, and now all of a sudden we want to blow the whole thing up. It is not the same, you guys. It is not the same.
On paper, since we're talking on paper, so paper like stats, right? Lewis Ferguson and Xerxes, stats wise, are better than both of our second strikers and most of our midfielders, stats-wise. So on paper, Bologna probably have better players, maybe. We're talking hypothetically, Lewis Ferguson and Xerxes, numbers-wise, slightly better than most of our players. So, I don't know what that says about you. It's hypothetical on paper.
It just comes down to, again, and I say this, the players play, winners win. You guys, I need more from our players. And this is another point I want to make about this whole kind of collapse that we see right now. And this is a problem I had with guys that were giving me so much heat this week because they were calling suffering, saying we are suffering. I'm sorry, guys. I've been through it and I've suffered with this club. If we believe that a roster like we have right now, what we see on the pitch and whatnot, second place to potentially a record-breaking side. If we say that with this many young guys on the team that have accomplished nothing, okay, and even key guys that have really accomplished nothing, if we're going to say that second place is suffering, I think you need to look at the irrelevancy Inter Milan had gone through, our battles from 2006 to 2011. This is not suffering. And this is what I'm not grasping from those that feel that way, because it doesn't feel like, for me, again, my expectations going into this year, we're not far from it. So how is this suffering? We're not overachieving by any stretch. We're not underachieving either. We're right where we should be based on what we see on the pitch and everything. Now, as far as One of the things here, I think it was James that brought up about it's Max's job to drive the players, not just tactics and roster. But where do the players come in on self-accountability? So, like, we want Max to tell them exactly what to do in every single situation and scenario that they're going to face in the final third. You can't remember that much shit anyways. You want to give players less to think about when you're on the pitch so they could play freely. But now it's his job to try his best to do motivation. And when they can't get the job done on the pitch, it's because he didn't motivate them either, essentially. I don't know.
Yeah.
Here's another thing.
I don't buy it.
Yeah, I'm not kind of there.
All the time, and like we do all the pre and post match pressers, right?
Yeah.
How many shit games does Vlahovic have where Max comes out afterwards and goes, "He played really well tonight." We all know he played terrible, but Max goes, "Hey, he played well tonight. Hey, I'm happy with Fabio Moretti, right? Who hasn't played well all year. Hey, I'm happy with Federico Chiesa, even though he's suffering a little bit." Your coach is defending your players a lot. Your coach is driving your players. He's making excuses for your players when they're not performing, right? And some of those guys, like in the case of Vlahovic, when he was backing him, ended up finding some form there a little bit. So I don't really know like what more you can ask for. It's style of play, I get it. Like it's not great.
That's what people hang up on.
Mark says the suffering is the style of play. I have non-Juve fans watch our games and they're like, this is awful football. It is hard to watch. I can't say that the style isn't tough and can be seen as suffering. Okay, I can't say anything against it. However, I've made the point that the style also kind of depends on the weapons you have available. And for me, if we have this many question marks about key guys in our lineup, are you going to have a midfield that oozes that style that you like to see with Rabiot and McKennie? It's not going to happen. It's going to be a physical, like a run, and that's going to be put to Max. But who has come in and changed that? Who has offered that flair that we can bank on? Because Moretti has had a million chances. He has the abilities, he has the traits to offer that flair and clean up this style, but you can't bank on the guy.
Well, and there's something we don't really talk about here, which is the two flair players are both suspended for off-the-field issues.
Yet another instance that makes anything but normal out of these 3 years, you guys.
It's a shame that Max Allegri gave Pogba steroids and Fajoli betting apps.
But
yeah, right.
Here's one of the biggest things for me that is consistent, and you could probably go back to Pirlo's season as well because they were out of the Scudetto race early. But anytime the expectations kind of increase at Juve for some time now, these players have not answered the call, and they have bombed. Okay, and if we look to that Empoli game as well, that is the players bombing. Okay, that's the players bombing. Milik with an absolute brain fart, and this guy's a vet. And then we try to fight through, try to get it done, and it all goes on Max. Why did you start Milik? All this and everything, but you guys, players play, winners win. Milik put his team in a brutal spot, but after that, Inter, now Udinese with 70% possession. I'm not going to put on a coach. Guys, these guys mentally still have a long way to go, but you have a young team. I do have to correct some because I've been saying third youngest side. It turns out we're about 8th, 9th, or 10th in that range of youngest. But my point still stands that the inexperience shows tremendously. But I did see a number that had us at 26 point something average age, which would have been third youngest. It turns out we're 27 something. So I don't know if a couple birthdays hit and then they did whatever. But listen, the mentality is not consistent with this team. And here's another sign. For me, this is a part that bothered me the most. Team mentality, players' mentality, everything. Leadership, lack of leadership. Max Allegri has all this shit going around in social media. There's a billboard ad space put out calling for his head at his position. I know for a fact the team saw it. Okay? Now, as a leader of your team, as a member of this team where Max has protected every single fucking player all year through shitty performances where I've seen him walk out to the press conference and say he had a good game when we all know it's bullshit. Not one guy steps up and says, hey, you know what? It's up to us. But you know what? Past guys have done that. Past guys have taken the accountability and have said, it's on us, the guys on the pitch. The majority of it is on us on the pitch. When you want to take the majority of the credit for the victories, then you have to take some of the heat when it's going wrong. But to take one guy, take the brunt of it, and not one leader, captain, anybody off this team that he has defended, to step up and just say, guys, it's overboard. It's on us. We have to do better. That tells me a lot about our guys and the men we have on this fucking team.
Well, it's the same way as when this could be pre-selected, so I don't know this, but it's the same way when we lose a game against Empoli or Udinese and your captains and your vice presidents aren't the ones facing the media. It's Cambiasso.
That's what I was going to say. That's what I was going to say. Yep.
Maybe they do pre-select it, but it is a little odd that, like, for about 4 years now, every time we lose a game, it's always like a big game. It's always like some random player that, is on the younger side that has to go face the press. There's not a veteran. There's not a leader. There's not a captain. It's not whoever wore the armband. It's not Alexandro. It's not Rabiot. It's not Danilo.
None of those guys.
No, it's like Moretti or Cambiasso or Locatelli, I think, did one. I think he did the Empoli game. Fine, he's a vice captain. But, like, still, I just don't – that sums up
they're afraid to face the music. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not like they don't want to face the music. They're not some of them aren't up for the challenge. And when the going gets tough, it's kind of a knock on the modern game. You see it throughout European football. Like the players, they can kind of dip, and it's the coach's fault. And, we're good, right? You see it all across the earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then to the flip side, Mark saying Max has never once said it was on him. Not once. He deflects and downplays expectations. And again, it's interpretation, Mark. It really is, because you can interpret it one way, saying that he's protecting his side by not going into everything. And let's take a look at leading up to that Inter game, because he was playing a lot of mind games and saying a lot about Inter and whatnot in little subtle jabs and everything like that. That's kind of him for me back in this team and starting to believe. But it's like everybody else with him wasn't there with him.
What's downplaying our objectives? His first press conference of this year, he said the goal was to finish in the top 4. He never said this year, hey, we're going to win the Scudetto. Now, at the end of last year, he said, I'd like to be back fighting for the Scudetto next year. Right? But since the start of this campaign, you can go back, look up the interviews. He said the goal was top 4. We can't compete with Inter, Milan, and Napoli. Turns out we can compete with 2 of those clubs, not the first one, but the expectations have been the same. Even Giuntoli says it. So it's that's the other thing too. Giuntoli will come out and say, hey, our expectations are top 4. And it's like, yeah, that's fine. Max will come out and say, and it's like, this guy's disrespecting the history of Juventus. Like, doesn't add up, right?
And I will say the Yildiz comments were bizarre. That one was a little bit bizarre after the Empoli game. I can't.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes, and to be fair, every member of Juve at some point has said something that's, questionable or whatever. Yeah. But nobody's perfect. But I think we're just trying to paint a picture that the weight is maybe a little bit too much on one of the scales. And this player's one seems to just ramp up in victory and completely disappear when it's not right. But I do see signs that we still have a long way to grow in terms of mentality and maturity and whatnot. But to see one of your members, guy that's protected you a lot, not get any backing from any leaders, and all these guys, we talked about Lou, you said about Cambiasso coming out. Like, I need more. I need more from this team, and I need leaders to be leaders. And we've said it last show. Who can you lean on this team? Bremer, Szczesny, maybe Danilo. Those are the only 3 names that came up.
I think it's pretty evident that no one wants to hear this either, because apparently Danilo can never ever be a captain at Juventus because he disrespects the history of the club. I don't know what that means, but two of those losses come when Danilo doesn't play in the game, and they're both on stupid mistakes, right? One at the back, one with the red card. Maybe Danilo offers a little bit more leadership than we know. Just maybe, you know. So
I
I would
think
say
I
he's one of those
think
reliable players.
I think the same message I put out after Inter needs to stand from here on out, everybody. And let's not get too high. Let's not get too low. Let's keep it level. Again, for me, where the expectations were going in the season, we're not far off. So let's just keep it level and see where we finish and then make a call. So Allegri in, Allegri out. I'm not even going to make a call on that at this moment in time. Joe, before we get into Verona and Juventus, because thank Christ, everybody, we got football today. But Joe, go ahead.
Yeah. Shout out to the Empire State peeps that are in the chat. The thing that I wanted to say, and maybe I'm dating myself in saying it, I'm certainly showing my age. 20 years ago, you would not see a banner or like a publicity stunt like that ever. You wouldn't see something in Times Square that says Allegri out. You wouldn't see a viral tweet that goes around, showing that. I think it just shows the kind of times that we live in. Very reactionary. Everyone wants to hear their voice or have their voice be heard, their opinion. When at the end of the day, that's not how things work in the world, right? So let's just take a little bit of a step back. The thing that would be happening is the Ultras would probably unfurl a banner in front of the club that said blah, blah, blah. It would be a little bit more subdued. It wouldn't be broadcasted in the biggest city in North America,
The interesting thing about
our shit.
The interesting thing about the Ultras that you bring up is after the Udinese game, they booed the players. Okay? Not them, essentially, but fans booed the players. I have no problem with that. And I want to stress this. For everybody that is max out right now, I have no problem with you having that opinion. It's not the opinion that anybody has had a problem with. Okay? We're just talking about maybe keeping things level, and where do the players come into this equation? Where do we lose context of these 3 years that have gone by? And I'm guilty of it too, because I think we live in a world now where everything is just expected like that. Everybody wants what they want, and they want it now. And the fact that we are working out of $342 million in debt when Max came on the first year goes out the wayside. All the shit that we went through last season seems to be forgotten as well. But I wanted him out last summer because the change that I do think is there this season, I didn't think he could bring it. My expectations of us being in second place, reaching Coppa Italia, I didn't think he could do it. I didn't think he could bring this team to fight for this Scudetto this season. But he has, and to actually be there around the February mark with Inter that's potentially record-breaking is actually maybe something a little more than I would have anticipated, to be honest. But it definitely is. But I think we can't lose context. We talked about the money that people want to say he has spent. Well, it's not really that much when you look at it over these past 3 years because we haven't had it, okay? You've got the wild card of Giuntoli and their partnership and everything. But you can be max out. The opinion is fine, okay? We have no problem with that. But let's look at the other variables too and just see. And where were your expectations into the season? If you thought we were going to run away with the Scudetto, then I understand you being upset, okay? I just don't think we're in this mode where we can call it suffering. But that's just me. We've shared our opinions. Your opinions we respect, and everybody can think whatever they want. But the Ultras, this is what's interesting. The fans booing, jeering after the game. The Ultras actually started chanting Max Allegri's name. They started chanting for Max Allegri. And then they started calling out the fans that were leaving the stadium early. And somebody wanted to put this ad space on Times Square as the same as the Ultras putting up a banner outside. I said, well, it's not quite the same, but you'll never see the Ultras do that unless somebody has actually acted out and disrespected Juventus. And this is where some fans have said, well, Max is not respecting Juventus. And that I do not agree with.
I also, to kind of highlight something that I was thinking about here, like when Joe was talking about the Ultras banners, there seems to be a disconnect. Now that Juventus is more global with social media, things like that, there seems to be a disconnect between like the Ultras and like the global fans that are on social media. Like the Ultras,
always has been, yeah.
Like the Ultras are like, like it's Allegri in, and then it's like, but the global fans like have this massive hatred for him. It's just an interesting kind of like thing I've noticed, right? It's just you see it more now.
Yeah. And Mark saying, my expectations are to not play like pussies versus relegation sides. That is on the whole team, players, and coach. Fair.
My expectation is to win game.
Yeah,
you know? But it's up to the guys, for me, get the job done. Today, it's Verona, and holy shit, everybody. This has to be a win. What are we talking about? This has to be a victory flat out, okay? Got to get the job done. Get your Storm the Barn questions in. The chat's been going nuts. I know there was some Storm the Barn questions in there before, but just fire them back in there again. We are going to quickly go through this matchup. Look, for Verona, winless in 4. They're most likely going to be playing a 4-2-3-1. They're not strong up top. Look, as far as this goes, Juve's got to get the job done. Vlahovic coming back. He has been strong in 2024. You got to have a strong showing here. We need to lean on these guys. We need to finally be able to lean on the guys that need to carry the weight, okay? We got to get to... Danilo is going to be back. A lot were saying that we were missing his leadership against Udinese, but to be honest, you shouldn't need that against Udinese. That game needed to be a victory flat out. Today, I don't care if we're away from home. Okay? Tricky? No. You've got another relegation battling side. This has to be a victory. But with everything going on, like I said, the intense scrutiny this team is on, the question marks around these players, what they fucking have here, okay? What they have here. Like, I think it's going to be tighter than it needs to be. I think it's going to be tighter than it needs to be, sadly. 4-2-3-1 is what they're going to be playing, but you can essentially expect it to play out as a 4-5-1, where they will try and flood, shut down the outsides, and force us through the middle. And again, when teams do that, we seem to struggle. Hopefully that's not the case today. Key stats before we get into predictions, everybody. As far as, like, and this is the thing. This is a game we should control. And the midfield, control the fucking game. 50-50s, don't go into 50-50s soft. Hammer. Get in there. Get stuck in. I want to see Rabiot, a guy that's worn the captain's armband, put in an actual captaincy shift in today's game, okay? Because I've only seen that maybe 3 times. A true captain-worthy performance out of Rabiot. Danilo, I want you to be a leader as well out there. Locatelli, I want you to have some influence, okay? McKennie, I want you running, doing your thing, and getting stuck in and create a little havoc up top. Yildiz and Vlahovic, I want you to give the back line fits. I want you to be physical. I want you to be strong. I want you to impose yourself on Verona. On the outsides, Kostic, I want you getting involved. I want you urging the team forward. Cambiaso, keep doing your thing. Like, these guys have to impose themselves on this team. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Key stats, Verona have failed to win 20 of their last 22 matches in Serie A. What the fuck are we talking about, you guys? Okay? Verona have failed to win any of their last 33 Serie A games against Juventus in Turin. Okay? Juventus have been drawing at halftime and winning at full time in their last 3 matches against Verona in all competitions. So, drawing at halftime in the last 3 matches against Verona, but ultimately winning in full time. a draw at halftime will probably create chaos on social media, but we'll see.
Yep.
Juve kept a clean sheet in their last 4 matches against Verona in all comps. Juve winless in their last 3 Serie A games, failing to score in their last 2. Do you guys know the last time Juve failed to score in 3 games?
No.
Del Neri's Juve in 2011.
Oh man.
Yeah, I blocked that season out of my brain.
I feel like that war meme. You know, like,
yeah, that got the Men in Black laser treatment there, Del Neri's session there. But that's the last time. Can happen today, and it won't happen today, okay? Guys, prediction challenge time. Thank you for the Storm the Barn questions. We will get to them. Final score, 2 tiebreakers, okay? I'll lead us off, if you guys don't mind. It's going to be a grind, everybody. I hate to tell you. It's going to be a grind. I'm calling 2-1 for Juventus just because we got to snap out of it. So I don't think it's going to be pretty. I don't think it's going to be an ugly, just get the win at all costs, kind of pick yourselves up type game. 2-1 for Juventus. Vlahovic scores a goal. I'm calling Vlahovic for a goal. And I think that one of our backs, either Danilo or Bremer, comes up with another one, okay? So, and for shits and giggles, I'm going to say Danilo getting the second. So 2-1, and I'm going Vlahovic and Danilo. Lou, you're up. Full-time score, 2 tiebreakers.
No one wants to hear this, but Verona away is not a fun fixture for Juventus. Never is. So I think we're going to it's going to be a 1-0 for me, and I think we're going to get a goal from Kenan Yildiz. He's due for 1.
There you go. Joe?
It's going to be late, though. It's going to be late.
Yeah, I'm going to – the Bentegodi and Tal – my friend Tal has said this before. It is not an easy place for us for whatever reason, despite all of those stats. But Lou, I'm gonna riff on your 1-0, but I'm gonna say that it's Bremer from a set piece.
By the way,
so 1-0 for both you fellas. So Joe's going Bremer.
I mean, okay. Bremer's suspended for this match, so let me.
Oh yeah. I forgot about that Rugani.
It's finally playing.
Yep. Forgot about that.
And that Rugani thing, you know, that I will say this, for all the emphasis we tried to put on the players today and whatnot, there have been some strange decisions, and I do think Rugani can be one of those things where I don't really understand this thing with Sandro, and that kind of stuff does drive me nuts about Max, but the grand scheme of things for me overall, I need more from these guys, okay? But let's see what happens. Rugani back in there. He deserves to be okay. Frank calling the Verona victory. Eesh. My God, I seriously hope not, okay? Sev's going 3-0 Juve, so he thinks we're going to get out of here and, have a solid boost to morale and everything. Michael Razzo's coming in 2-0 Juve. Dusan and Chiesa getting the goals. Tough game, 3 yellows, 7 corners. Yeah, I think it's going to be a tight one. We will talk about Juve's projected lineup. Just trying to track it here. I think we got the only question mark, I think, was going to be who starts up top next to Vlahovic, but I believe it's been Yildiz. Yes, so you've got Szczesny, Gatti, Rugani, Danilo, Cambiaso, McKennie, Locatelli, Rabiot, Kostic, Vlahovic, and Yildiz, okay? And that's put out by Romeo Agresti. And, yeah, again, you just got to win this one. That's all we can say. It has to be a victory. Absolutely has to be a victory. Milan is red hot, okay? Has been since middle of December. Creeping up on us here. But other fans are saying it's not must win because the gap is so big on 4th place there, like in 5th. No, you got to get things right.
Must win.
Yeah, it's a must win. You got to get things right. You can't keep this going when you're at a team like Juventus, the scrutiny that you're under, all the expectations, all the pressure. These guys need a win. They need a win desperately. Has to be today against Verona. No ifs, ands, or buts about it, okay? Now, let's have some fun. We'll quickly tackle some of these Storm the Barn questions, okay?
Before we start Storm the Barn, there's one comment I saw Shatterstar, shout out to him. Thanks for joining in the comments. But he said that we paid a lot of money for Alcaraz. We haven't paid anything for Alcaraz. I've seen that a
Haven't
couple of times.
paid nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Alcaraz cost us nothing. He was a loan. Like, if he plays, great. He may cost us something in the future, but we didn't spend any money on him. So, like,
I thought that the loan could end up being a total of 5.9 mil. So, but that's not a lot in the grand scheme of things. But it's just the loan, yeah. So we haven't actually spent, and the loan I guess goes down based on appearances. So let's see what happens with Alcaraz, and you know, I wouldn't be surprised if nothing really shows in significant minutes and everybody flips and is like, this is the guy we brought in. The possibility still stands for Alcaraz that he was simply brought in as a body, you guys. Like,
Yeah.
it still stands. Nobody really knows, okay? But storm the barn. Let's get to it, okay? Is Luca starting if we are competing for a Champions League title? Well, who else is on the roster? Who else is on the roster? Like, I mean, it really depends.
You can't just single out one player.
Yeah. If we're saying he's not worthy of a team battling for a Champions League title, I would have to say it really depends. If he found the play that he had for like whatever 4 games at one point this season, if he found that consistently, I'd say, yeah, why not? But it really depends on who's there. I don't know. We had a team that went to the finals that featured coming off the bench guys like Sturaro and Lamina and stuff like that. So, I mean, can Luca not be a part? But is he starting? Really depends on the rest of the midfield. I mean, I don't know. Nobody thought Pjanic would move from a advanced midfielder to a regista. And he did that with flying colors for us. And I would have never said he's going to start for a Champions League final side as a regista. Yeah, I don't know. It just really depends on the team, man. I don't know. Can't really say much more than that.
Man, I miss Pjanic.
Modric is out. Real Madrid at the end of the season, almost 100% by all accounts. Does he move the needle for it? He's 38 years old. But man, can this guy ball. But 38 years old. Could you imagine the frenzy Juventini would go on? Sign a 38-year-old Modric. I've always loved Luca Modric. But at 38, I've been harping on getting Cruz. Yeah. Tony Cruz is like my pipe dream. 33 years old, easily. He's got a couple more years in him. Modric is so class, though, man. But
he's a world beater, dude.
Does he move the needle for us based on the guys we have now? Yes, even at 38.
And think of the locker room too. Think of the locker room.
Does he move the needle for based on who we have there? Absolutely, he does.
Yeah,
absolutely does. Would I do it? I don't know. I don't know.
He's gonna want a lot of money.
Come on, God. Love you, Modric, but it's God.
Yeah, I feel like it's passable, but does he move the needle for us? Absolutely, he does. But it's a tough call because how much more?
Italy seems to be one of those countries where older players can certainly thrive. So I wouldn't be surprised that if he could do some things in Serie A. I wouldn't be. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right idea. But the way the question's phrased, yeah, I think he moves the needle in a bunch of different ways for us.
Yeah,
it does have a point. Acerbi found God at 35, and now all of a sudden can defend. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Pound for pound, compare current Juve squad to Liverpool. I think we're not that far off. Get me Klopp.
Ooh, there's
and that's not a question.
There's about a clear difference between
that's us. That's a statement for the barn. Not necessarily a question. Statement to the barn. Yeah, fair enough. Whatever, get Klopp. People want Klopp. People want these high-profile guys. And, there's question marks.
Is Klopp going to come here when he can't spend any money for 2 years?
I know. That's kind of the thing. He spent, like 500 million less than Pep, but that's still a lot of money.
Yeah,
500 million less than Pep.
Yeah, they're like, considering
And he
Man
still
City was
needs
like
4
cooking their
years to
books,
get a team
like
going. Like that's the thing. He still needs time to get a team going. He needed
Yeah.
time for that Liverpool cycle. So
Yeah, Forza Juve saying realistic player that would make the biggest difference if we bring him in this summer. I'm going to my pipe dream. If Cruz makes a massive difference in the
big
middle of the
difference.
pitch. I even think a guy like Coop Miners makes an impact. Samardzic makes an impact. But if you got Tony Cruz, that makes a big impact for me. And I think it could be realistic. I mean, everything says he's going to sign for one more year, but I'll say even a guy like Coop Miners goes a long way. And we've been hearing the news that Juve is going to push hard for the Rabiot renewal. And I've said that I've gone full circle. I've battled this in my head so many times. I'm done. That I'm done. I'd let him walk. And I think we go further with somebody more technical and more rounded in the midfield. So I would say even a guy like Coop Miners makes a big difference. But who would make the biggest difference? A guy like Cruz, who is world class, undoubtedly.
I think there's a based on like just players on the roster. I think that a big difference could come with like Fajoli next year. I think we kind of forget that he's still around, right? Not saying he'll necessarily start, but I think that there were some really good things in that first season that we unfortunately didn't get to see build upon this year. So I'd be curious to see him. I'm also like really curious by Jallo because he could play in the back four. He could play as a right back. He could play in the back three. He could almost kind of hybrid, a 3-5-2 or 4-2-3-1 in the way that like Allegri kind of liked to do that with him. So I'd like to see that. Like, just based on players we have on the roster now, signings, it's different because it's hypothetical. A couple of those names could help us. Yeah. Just who's on the roster, I'd like to see those two players next summer and see if they can make a difference. Because Fajoli's been training for a whole year. He just hasn't played any matches. I'd like to see where he's at, right?
Yeah.
He's kind of a
that'll be interesting.
Now, who do you think has the highest ceiling in our squad? Joe, who's got the highest ceiling in our squad?
Ooh, that's tough. Just based upon what I'm seeing or my agendas.
Both.
I still think Vlahovic is going to be an absolute unit. He has all the tools to be a truly amazing striker. But lately, Cambiaso looks incredible. I love that kid. I think that he has a very high ceiling, personally.
Okay.
He can dribble, he can cross, he can play either side. I love watching him play.
Yeah, Cambiaso, I will say, is like one of my favorite Juventus players this season. He's awesome. But the highest ceiling for me, I think it's a shoe-in. I think it's Keenan Yildiz. I think there's some things that he does that just for like an 18-year-old, a lot of guys can't do. And I know like the Copa tie, things like that, but some of the goals he scored, some of the technique he showed, I do think that Al's criticism, like, hey, he doesn't get on the ball enough, is pretty fair. I think that will come in time. But I think there's a ceiling there that there's something different about him. There just is. You get that aura around him, right?
And I did say the one showing, because my answer is I think Yildiz probably has highest ceiling right now. If we're looking at him for an 18-year-old, even in the games where I said, he kind of struggled, whatnot, the decisions that he was making, that he was trying to accomplish, whatever, were still all the right ones. It's just, some execution issues and whatnot. But like for 18, situationally and the decision making, he is well ahead of his years. And then when you factor in the technique and everything, I think he can be something extremely special for Juventus. So that would be my answer to that question. What's the latest on Pogba? Live watch along. Well, Pogba, we got to wait for this trial date. We all thought it was going to be February 15th, but they said after February 15th is when we're going to hear when this trial is going to go down. We just have to wait and see. Watch along today? No. Daughter's birthday party. All right. I'm going to be clotheslining kids on bouncy castles all day. All right. So no watch along today. But, and it hurts me because no matter win or lose, I love the live reactions and you guys have been great. But we'll get back to the live watch along soon. Not today. Post match podcast tomorrow morning. Hopefully it's a victory Sunday. Okay. I think we have one more. So if we do have, no, I think we're good. But there's one thing I wanted to bring up, and thank you everybody for the well wishes for Lennon. Her name is Lennon, turning 5. All right, and keeping me on my toes every single day. Okay, now we're gonna get to the Chiesa thing. There was a story that came out, just a report, and just talking about the situation, comparing it to Del Piero, and now all of a sudden, people thought it was a comparison between Chiesa and Alessandro Del Piero. Now, there were some that were putting out there, and some are longtime followers and supporters of the AJC that I was having a discussion with that said, I couldn't imagine where you guys would be with Alessandro Del Piero when he went through saying, well, I was there. I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I lived through that. There's a big difference. Okay, because number one, they're just talking about the situations. Serious injury, 2 years to get back, and Moji has even spoken to it, say, hey, we waited for him, because he was critical of Chiesa's performances, but he said, hey, we waited for Del Piero. Maybe they should wait for Chiesa. But Del Piero was battling with R9 at the time as best footballers, you know what I mean? Like, that's the level Del Piero was at.
Mm-hmm.
Federico Chiesa, for me, just speaking personally, I need a little bit more from his end. I need to, like, right now, if I'm looking at this situation as I am from a fan on the outside looking in, I have no idea where his head's at. Is he in this kind of for himself? Is he looking out for his future and maybe it's away from Juventus? Like, I don't know where this guy stands. Like, I really don't. So it's like, I don't know where he stands. And has he done enough to warrant a pay increase of any kind when we're trying to bring everybody else down? I can't even really say that much. Should he not be accepting at least even a 1 year to see what's going on when we've stuck with him through injury and everything and have been patient and everything? Like, I need a little bit more from his end, because the one thing, if you are going to compare situations, is that take away the skill and the class and the abilities. You had a guy that you knew 1000% where his heart and where his mind were. And that was always Juventus.
Yeah. Yep.
And this is how I feel about this situation, that with Chiesa, and I love the guy. He's been my favorite player on the team for a while, one of my favorite players to watch, but when he's out there, but there's question marks. There's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of concerns around there, but I don't know where his head's at. And for that, it kind of bothers me, and it's kind of leave me questioning the whole scenario around him. And it's opened me up to the potential of saying goodbye, even though, earlier I was saying I think we should do everything to keep him, which I ultimately would love to see him stay at Juventus and stick around and be part of this team moving forward. But I just don't know where his head's at. What do you guys think?
There's a big underlying thing here that is, and this is hypothetically, this is not what I believe, but if you're looking at it from the club's lens, right? We just talked about Keenan Yildiz having some of the highest potential of any player in this club, right? And then you have a player who's out on loan who is performing double digits in goals, double digits in goal contributions, and Sule, who we have to make a decision on this summer. Unlike maybe Del Piero, who got 2 years because maybe there was no one behind him. I know I didn't live through that time, so you guys can maybe clarify that a bit. But, like, there's two players that are just, like, kind of, like, edging, right? So you're not just betting on Chiesa's future and, like, what his potential is. You might be betting on, does he get in the way of the potential of two budding stars, right? We know at least one could be a budding star, but we don't know kind of where Sule's potential is. And that's up for debate. I think it's fair on both sides of the argument. But that is the hard problem with this is, do you look at Chiesa and say, hey, like you've warranted enough to stay over one of those two guys. Because you know Keenan Yildiz is not going to sit around and come off the bench forever. A player like that like wants to be a star. And
Yeah.
Matthias Sule might do that, but Juventus have to just make a decision to cash in on him, not because he's been so good this year they can get market value for him, which may make this argument pretty easy. If we're taking that aside, like has Chiesa individually done enough? I have been a little disappointed with him this year. I thought at least we would see him adjust his game a bit. I thought that he would be better in the role that he's in. If he signed a 1 year, I'd be okay with it. You know, just a 1 year. It's kind of like, hey, there's your 2 year grace period. Show up now.
Same
Or like,
money, Lou.
same money. Yeah, no wage increase. It's got to be the same salary. I don't think anyone gets an increase this year. I think everyone's making the same amount. Maybe like some of the younger guys might get a bump, but I think no one on the so yeah, 1 year at the same amount, I'd be okay with it. I couldn't say right now, like, hey, we're gonna give you a long-term contract and make you a pillar of the club. I can't say that right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
Joe, your thoughts and feelings around this Chiesa scenario?
I mean, the first thing that crossed my mind was that we're not comparing ability or whatever. It's just two very similar situations that occurred and very eerily, similar injuries, knee injuries, whatever, what have you. And it's all about how Chiesa bounces back. Del Piero did take 2 years. It's true. It was a different time. The medicine and the technology that we have now, that has increased player turnaround immensely. Like 2 years was fast back in the day to come back, in all honesty. Some players never come back from an injury like that. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that, and you've said it before, Al, is that Chiesa needs to adjust his game. And to me, and I've said it before too on Twitter and on here, that I just do not see the same level of football guile that Chiesa has compared to Del Piero. He can't play directly like that anymore. It's just too much wear and tear on his knee. He's going to re-injure it, and we'll get into the same sort of cycle again and again and again. Yeah. And I think that Lou made very, very good points in saying we have all of those guys waiting in the wings. It's going to be a very, very tough decision to make. I mean, and like you said, Al, we knew where Del Piero's heart was. I can't say I can say the same thing about Chiesa 100%.
Yeah, it's tough. And to be honest, I'm going to throw another thing in here just to wrap up on this Chiesa thing, is just that sometimes things just don't work. And it's not necessarily the fault of anyone involved, player, club, manager, anyone. Sometimes it just doesn't work out. And maybe there's something to be said for Chiesa getting away from Juve and getting a fresh start somewhere else. And maybe expectations kind of lay off with that change and he can get back to doing what he needs to do without that weight or that pressure that this team didn't wait for them. He just kind of showed up and it's like, let's see what happens type thing. I think the whole time I've been saying too, you've got Yildiz that has shown way more than what I think many expected for the first team. And you have Sule in the background having a strong loan and everything. And I think all this is weighing in, and maybe that's why you get a game against Udinese where Chiesa just looks like he's trying to do way too much, and it actually hurts his perception on the match and makes him look not as good as we know he can be. And maybe that's playing all into this, and it could be something that, like I said, sometimes it just doesn't work out for a number of different reasons. Time will tell what happens. All I know is this, you guys. Again, I'm not telling anybody what opinions to have. I respect all your opinions. I respect all of you as Juventini. As Juventini, we are all kind of bonded by what we've gone through and everything. I don't think we are suffering right now. Okay? We're not overachieving by any means, but we are definitely not underachieving. Okay? You kind of get what you get on the pitch and from what we're seeing, and I think it's fair to ask a little bit more from everyone. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Max has made some questionable decisions, no doubt. Okay? In terms of changing everything and blowing it up, are we really at that point? I would say no. He's made subtle changes, subtle adjustments. He's tried. Locatelli and Rabiot have moved into two-man pivots, which they went through a stretch where it looked fantastic. But then all of a sudden, as of late, it looks like dog shit. Players, coach. It's all kind of relevant, okay? He's got his faults. The players have theirs, okay? You win as a team. You lose as a team. Let's see where we finish. There's still a lot of football. And then let's make some calls and some decisions. But the team is going to be the one to make those. In the end, I have one thing to fall back on, and that is that we finally have a guy that looks so invested and so involved in Giuntoli. I have faith in Giuntoli. Yes, he still has to prove himself, but I have faith. You guys, a lot of football. Get the job done. Today against Verona has to be a win. I don't want to hear anything else about it. It's up to all of them. Max is going to decide his lineup, okay? We are in a formation, a setup we have played all year. You're going up against Verona, winless in 4. Everything else will be an excuse. Has to be 3 fucking points. All right? Bottom line. You guys, Joe, Lou, always a pleasure, okay? Lovely for you guys to set aside the agendas, okay, just to join me together, all right?
This was a painstaking hour and a half with Joe.
If Joe would just stop fucking putting pineapple on pizza, we would all get along, okay?
No, that's not true, Berto. Joe would do something else that would annoy me. Like I said, this is like Inter Juventus here. It'll never be better.
It's true. It's true. We do have
there
a little...
was never going to be peace. There's never going to be peace.
You guys in the live chat, you've been fantastic as always, okay? And like I said, it's all opinions, but the friendly fire, let's keep it to a minute, but I could take it. So you guys, you guys have been pretty good, but out there in Twitter, did I hear some shit out there on Twitter? I tell you, these guys that put up that billboard are a little over aggressive, but even in the heat I took, it's funny because they said some crazy personal shit, which I'll never get to over fandom, but I kind of like, in a sense, respected the passion, because at the end, it's all about passion for Juve. So you know what? If you want to make me a punching bag, if that makes you feel better about the whole situation, I really don't give a shit. For me, I don't care coach, I don't care players, I don't give a shit who's involved. I want to see Juve thriving, okay? That's all I care about. But let's stay calm. Stay calm. It is all about passion. I respect that. Let's see what happens today. We got to get the job done, all right? And no, thank all of you, okay? Enjoy the match. Tomorrow, post-match podcast. Holy shit. Please tell me it's going to be a victory Sunday, all right? Let's find out. But take care. If you're not going to be here with us tomorrow, enjoy your weekends. But hopefully we see you all back tomorrow and we have a bunch of goals and a victory to discuss. Fino alla fine. Forza Juve. Ciao tutti.
Yeah.